Go ahead and get things started. Hello and welcome everyone to the American Family Insurance Dream Bank, where we believe in the transformative power of dreams. My name is Andy, and on behalf of the entire team, thank you so much for joining us here today for this event. As we get started, we always like to learn where folks are tuning in from and encourage you to pop in the chat where you are tuning in from today. I'm from a overcast downtown Madison, Wisconsin, a little bit of snow this morning. Always like to learn where people are joining us from. For those of you who've attended our virtual or in-person events in the past, welcome back. And for everyone that is joining us for the first time, I'd love to take a moment to introduce you to DreamBank. So here at American Family Insurance, life is better when you're under a roof, because when you feel totally supported and protected, any dream is possible. And that's why we created DreamBank. It's an inspirational community destination and virtual experience designed to help people pursue, achieve, and protect their dreams. And then at DreamBank, there's something for every dreamer. From weekly events to immersive signature programs, special events, and on-demand content are always free programming, and resources are designed to bring you inspiration, motivation, and support no matter your interest. So you can check out our upcoming virtual and in-person events at amfam.com/dreambank and reserve your spot today. A couple housekeeping items before I introduce our featured speaker. The chat section is active. Go ahead and pop any questions you may have for Steve in there, any sort of dialogue or discourse with any of the other folks who are tuning in today, or any questions maybe you have in regards to the Zoom audio video things. We'll go ahead and address those to the best of our abilities. And then once this event is done, you will be receiving a recording of this event to the email address in which you used to register. So if you wanted to go back and watch the content again, maybe share with someone who wasn't able to attend, you'll be able to do that shortly after. And then lastly, we have a small post-event survey that will also be in your inbox for the email address in which you used to register for the event today. Couple of questions in there, doesn't take very long, maybe just a few minutes, really helps kind of guide and dictate the type of content that we put out. So would really appreciate any feedback that you have for us in that section, the survey, excuse me. But I want to go ahead and welcome back to the DreamBank virtual stage, Steve McIrvin. So Steve heads up product partnerships and business development for Wyze Labs, the value leader in smart home and security. Steve started out in connected devices over 10 years ago by launching Amazon's first IoT device, the Dash voice scanner wand for grocery shopping. He's based remotely in Blacksburg, Virginia. He and his wife have 4 kids, 1 very spoiled pet rabbit, and too many smart home gadgets to count. So without further ado, I'd like to welcome back to the DreamBank virtual stage, Steve McIrvin. Steve, go ahead and take it away.
Thank you so much for having me back, Andy. I appreciate that introduction. I'd forgotten the part about the spoiled rabbit, so that made me laugh. He's still very spoiled, and we have 2 parakeets now, and hopefully you won't hear them during the presentation. They can get pretty loud in the mornings. So you are in the right place. I know this image here looks a little more sci-fi than you might be expecting, but I did that on purpose because I organized today's talk around 4 key areas, the 4 elements of earth, wind, air, and fire. So that's what this graphic represents, a little sci-fi kind of journey, but each quadrant is one of those areas. So we can go ahead and get started, and I'll try to mix in a lot of smart home solutions there as well, but I want to make sure that even if you don't want to have anything to do with smart home, you can still find value in the talk just through some practical advice and tips without the gadgets. But if you do love smart home, there'll be plenty of chances to learn more about the smart home stuff that Wyze sells, but also that are available in the market as well. So as I said, we're going to do fire as the first starting out, and preventing fire obviously is something you really want to do and be able to manage that and make sure that your house is as safe as can be. And then we'll go to water, air, and finally ending up in earth. And if you've been to one of my talks before, you know I did talk a little bit about air quality in the past, so I'll just touch on that this time, but I also have a little bit deeper dive into furnaces and filtering, especially even without a separate air purifier. So let's start off with fire. Heating, lighting, electricity, all that. And so the first area we want to be able to dive into is pretty obvious, and everyone knows about them. You know you should do it, but it's the smoke detectors. And the first thing that a fireman or firefighter is going to tell you is, hey, check those, get those checked out, get them installed professionally. So I'm assuming that if you're on this call and you're thinking about your home already, you already have the smoke detector. But what's easy to do after you install them is to kind of forget about them. They don't, they're annoying when they don't work, and they're invisible the rest of the time. So if you hear the chirp and you get a false alarm, then you pay attention. But the rest of the time, they could just be totally broken, or the batteries are dead, or you have no idea, and you need to be able to check those. So the recommendation is to check those every at least once a year, hopefully twice a year. I recently went through and replaced all of my wired smoke detectors. So we had a wired system in this house, and I did 6 at once. And I gamified it. I made like a little scavenger hunt saying, okay, where are the oldest smoke detectors in my house? I bought a 6-pack. So I went through and replaced all 6 oldest ones. And it was kind of fun to go around and discover which ones were all made at the same time, which ones had been replaced since the house was bought. And I didn't buy those new combo ones. So if you're familiar with smoke detectors nowadays, they will sometimes come with carbon monoxide and sometimes even a third sensor in there. And I just bought the pure smoke alarm ones because I already had a couple carbon monoxide detectors in key areas. Like I have them in our master bedroom, I have them in the furnace room, and I have them in one more area on the main level, just for safety there. So these other ones I didn't need to make the carbon monoxide detectors, but you of course can buy the combo ones, and they even have ones that are talking and maybe with a built-in light. So there's a lot of different features and fancy ones. So just get one that fits your budget, and then plan on checking it every year or so. And especially if it's over 10 years old, it almost certainly needs to be replaced. And the new ones actually come with usually a built-in lifetime battery that will just end at 10 years. So you definitely need to replace those. One nice thing that if you want to do a hybrid model and you don't want to have those fancy smart detectors, which you can get, but they're pretty expensive, Wyze, every camera that we've sold that's a wired camera, so starting from our older ones and now up to our current V4 camera, it will go ahead and listen for the distinctive alerts put out by a smoke alarm. And you may not know this, but a smoke alarm and a carbon monoxide alarm actually have different tone patterns. And so a camera that's calibrated like ours can listen for those precise tone patterns, and it can give alert on your phone saying, hey, there's a carbon monoxide alarm going off right now. So you can get that alert through this inexpensive $20 or $30 camera, even if you're not at home. And the beautiful part about having the camera is it can cover multiple different carbon monoxide or smoke alarm sensors. So it can say, hey, you've got one camera for the kitchen, and it can cover the one in the kitchen and the living room and maybe a first floor bedroom, and it can hear that from quite a distance, because those are obviously very loud alarms. So that's a good hybrid. If you don't want to go and replace all your alarms with something smart, you can use a camera. Just a couple cameras around the house will cover all the area you need to listen for. All right. So the next area is that we probably all know about, but maybe you haven't done recently and you need to go check. And this is very, very practical, very low tech, but just go clean your dryer vent. If you have a dryer at home, it's going to have lint built up in it, and that stuff is extremely flammable. It's so flammable in that my son's scouting troop will often use that. They'll take the dryer lint in like a paraffin or something like that and use that as a fire starter when they go camping. So very, very hazardous if you let that build up, especially in the winter months when it gets really dry in the house. So now's a good time to do that. And that picture right there you're seeing, don't judge me, but that's a real live picture. It had gotten pretty built up. I think it had been about a year since I had last cleaned mine. So in preparation for this call, I went out and did that, and as a reminder to myself. And I am fortunate that I can actually clean the majority of the vent straight from the outside. I don't have to take off the vent and the tube that connects my dryer. So that's really nice. But you in your house, your situation may be different. You may have to actually disconnect your dryer to do a good job. But regardless of what you have to do, make sure you do it at least once a year and get all that stuff out of there. And especially if your place doesn't have this screen that I'm showing on mine, that grid pattern, that's specifically to keep out rodents and birds. The birds love to make nests. It's nice and warm. There's maybe plenty of nesting material in there. So a lot of times a bird will actually make a nest in there, or sometimes they can actually crawl up into the dryer. And so obviously no one wants that. So go ahead and make sure you have some sort of screen, or I like that grid pattern that's a little bit looser, and It's not going to build up as much lint as a tight metal screen would do. And it's far enough away from the dryer that the plastic doesn't matter. So it doesn't need to be metal, just as long as it's able to keep the animals out.
Steve, we got a comment from someone says that they just installed the double magnetic door for pest control. So
Oh, nice. Okay.
folks
Very
adopting
smart.
practices. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a great way to do it. Yeah, I think this one I have is a little bit older. So if there's a newer solution out there that you like, and they're pretty easy to install. I was looking at this one, and it's just two screws with the those little concrete anchors that you have to. The hardest part about if there's nothing there now, you have to be able to get in to that grout, and so maybe the magnetic one is something that could solve that if it has a more clever solution than what I have with those concrete anchors. So thanks for that comment. I really appreciate that. All right. The statistics when I was preparing for this says that about a third of home heating fires or home fires attributed to some sort of heating are from space heaters. So you think, okay, the fireplace is the most dangerous part, or maybe a gas furnace, but it's actually the space heater is really, really dangerous. And that's probably the riskiest thing I do. I actually have two space heaters in my house, but I'm really careful with them. We have a room above my garage for my home office, and it gets really cold up here in the winter and really hot in the summer. So in the winter, at least, I run a space heater, and then we have a basement bedroom is the other place. And so what I did for the basement bedroom where my son is at, if you want to be very safe about it, is we bought him one of these Dreo brand smart heaters, and it looks pretty fancy because it's wall mounted. But the surprising thing is it's actually very inexpensive. It was less than $100. And the nice thing is it's smart as well. So the wall mounting part reduces the risk of tip over. It takes about 10 minutes and you mount it permanently on the wall, hopefully find the stud and just slide it on there. So you really have a lot lower risk of it falling over or of getting draperies or something in the way, someone bumping into it. And then the smart aspect of it is that you can see the temperature. You've got the digital temperature readout and you've got a remote control, but you also have that app control. And so that app allows you to do things like have a really nice, clean user interface to allow you to program it. So if you're like me and you don't want to get up early in the mornings in the winter, you can have the heater come on at 6 a.m. and wake you up for like a 6:30 or a 7 a.m. Wake up time. And the app is really easy to program and it has an intuitive interface. It also allows you to control it remotely. So if you go away and you're thinking, hey, did I remember to turn that off? You can check with the app and you can say, oh, yep, I turned it off, or no, I forgot and left it on while I'm gone, which is not safe. So then the app can turn it off for you. So that's really convenient. That's a lot safer. And so if you do have to use a space heater and you want to do it safely, buy a brand that you trust, maybe something like this Dreo or a brand that's even more that you're familiar with, and use one of these smart features with it and make sure you mount it securely away from any obstacles so that you can use it safely. All right, so this is a photo right here in the left of underneath my desk right now, and it looks pretty bad. But the good news is that none of those devices that I have plugged in are drawing a lot of current, so it's not a real fire hazard risk. But especially this time of year, you've probably seen the temptation to plug in like 19 different Christmas decorations into one outlet. And so depending on how much current they're drawing and how frayed and old the cords are, or how much of a tripping hazard those are, it can get pretty dangerous. So I would recommend that you really look at the chance to simplify your outlets. Make sure that, especially if there's any nuisance tripping from a circuit breaker, it might not be just a weird breaker. It might be actually a problem. So don't just ignore that. Take that very seriously. And then in the kitchen is probably the area where we're going to have the most problem with these breakers and the outlets. And this is driven largely by two big trends that we've seen lately. And you could probably put in the comments like what your favorite model of these is. But the biggest trend we've seen are the sales just exploding of air fryers and instant pots. And both of those drive a ton of current. So they're going to use a lot of power and they're going to be very likely to trip a breaker. And it's especially, yeah, someone's putting in the comments already. Thank you. It's especially likely that their cord is going to be frayed. They're going to put a lot of fire hazard there. So my advice on those is to just dedicate a countertop space for those and give them their own circuits. So map out your circuits in the kitchen and find out which ones can be dedicated to that air fryer or to that Instant Pot, and just leave it there. Don't keep unplugging it. Don't risk fraying that cord or wearing out the outlet. Just leave it plugged in and leave it on its own outlet so you're not tempted to plug something else into it and create a situation where you're going to trip the breaker or have some sort of arcing. And then finally, unattended stoves are another huge area in the kitchen. And so this is a true but embarrassing story. So that the closest I've ever come to burning up anything, burning down my house or creating a fire was when I was boiling a pan of eggs. And it's been, I feel safe talking about this because it's been over 20 years ago now. But I was boiling this pan of eggs and I said, oh, I'm late for an appointment. And I had to leave. And I just left. I didn't even think about the eggs on there. And I came back 2 hours later. The house was completely filled with smoke. Like, I mean, it was literally like scene out of Hollywood where it was so thick. Probably, I shouldn't have even entered, honestly. It was probably too dangerous to enter the house. But I opened the doors, opened the windows. It took several weeks for the odor to go away. But fortunately, the only casualty was just the pan basically was not usable. I mean, there were just these charred husks of these eggs left in the pan. So we threw away the pan and the stove was fine. The house was fine after a couple of weeks. But man, that's not something I ever want to repeat. And so if you've had that kind of situation where you think you've left on the stove or you don't know if it's unattended, you can use something like a panning camera. So we sell this Wyze Cam pan. Just have it in your kitchen, and it's great to check on your pets. Maybe watch what's going on in the kids if they've left something out or they're doing something, or maybe you've forgotten left the faucet dripping or something like that. Or in this case, you could look and see if the stove was still on. So in that case, it would have also the Wyze Cam pan would have told me. We talked about that smoke alarm. It would have given me a smoke alarm setting on my phone. Obviously, when this happened 20 years ago, I didn't have any smart devices. But nowadays, if that had happened, I would have left and I would have immediately gotten a smoke alarm alert. Hey, there's something going on in your kitchen. And I could have come back and turned that stove off before it completely filled with smoke. So yeah, use the camera not just for security and not just for the outside of your home, but you can use it for the inside of your home as well, and not just worrying about burglars, but just things that you want to check on and just your peace of mind. Okay, so in our theme, we've got first of all fire and now water. And so we want to talk about leaking. And one source I read says that water damage is actually 7 times more common than fire damage in your home when they talk about dollar damage or a number of claims. And you can think about that because if you do have a fire in your house, you're probably going to have some water damage with it. So that's probably pretty accurate. The nice thing is that water rarely is this kind of all at once situation. Usually it's detecting, it's slow and quiet. And so you have a chance to stop it before it gets really bad. And one of the products that can do that is a leak sensor. And I really advocate for having a leak sensor under every potential source of water in your home. And Wyze does sell a leak sensor. And the problem with the smart leak sensors is that they're pretty expensive. So what I did is I put 2 of our leak sensors in the most, what I thought were critical places in our house, under the dishwasher for me and next to the water heater. And then if you can see this graphic of this 5-pack down at the bottom of the slide, I bought 2 5-packs of those so that I could put them under every toilet and every sink in our house. And those are just not smart water sensors. They're actually really pretty loud sirens, and they just go off and start a very annoying siren beeping pattern that if you have any water at all, they're going to go off, and they can detect leaks directly on top of them, but also from beneath them. So yeah, that's what I would recommend is if do a hybrid approach where you have some smart leak detectors and then some of these just more simple loud ones that you can hear and you can catch this leak before it really starts to destroy your wood, your floors, your cabinets, or leak into your basement or leak wherever. Um, it's a really easy fix, and the cost of this 5 pack I think was around $30. And considering how much you can spend on water damage and replacing a floor, or replacing a ceiling, or foundational issues, it's so low of investment and an insurance policy. So I'm going to take a drink here for I've been talking a lot. Okay, so back to basements. We talked about if you have a leak upstairs, it's going to flood your basement. The other way a basement can flood is you probably have dug out in an area where you need to have a sump pump. And I've lived in this kind of house before, and it was always nerve-wracking, especially during a rainstorm, because the rain's going to do two things. It's going to be more likely to flood your house. It's going to make that sump pump work really hard. But then lightning and power and maybe falling trees are probably going to cause the power to go out. So you've got this kind of double whammy. When you need the sump pump most is also when it's most likely to go out. And if I wasn't home, I'd be especially worried that I was away and my basement could be flooding and I wasn't there to watch it. But now, of course, we talked about that leak sensor. So you can put a leak sensor just outside the sump pump. So if it starts overflowing, you can immediately hear that via your phone or audibly. Or the other thing you can do is we can see in this photo I grabbed, this screen capture from the Wyze Cam Reddit. This Reddit user set up this trigger so that the Wyze Cam he was using as basically a leak sensor. So a $20 camera he was able to use as this trigger so he can look down and see visibly if it's running, but also we have sound detection on these cameras too. So even just when there's not a flooding event going on and he's not, worried about it, he can still hear audibly. He can see the alert from the sound notification on his phone so that he can say, hey, the pump is running regularly when it's supposed to be and it's doing its job. So that's kind of a unique feature of that. You think a camera is only for visual stuff, but actually it can detect audible stuff and make sure that the pump is running as well. So of course, if you're worried about water, you're probably worried about freezing as well. And in my area, the power goes out at least once a year, usually 2 or 3 times. And the worst is when it happens during winter. And so I'm always reluctant to travel during winter because I'm like, oh, I can't be home. If the power goes out, that means there's no heat and the pipes are going to freeze. And so the first rule is obviously just when you're traveling, don't let your house go below 55. Set the thermostat above that. Open the cabinet doors, let air circulation in, especially around areas like that are up higher that are going to freeze quicker. Your basement's actually probably the least likely place to freeze because it's more insulated from the earth, but up higher in the top bedroom where it gets a little bit colder and maybe near the attic, you're gonna towards the outer walls is a risky area. And so you can have a smart thermostat that will allow you to set some sort of alert that if it does drop below 50 degrees or if the power goes out and you know that, hey, my thermostat's not reachable now, I can't get to it, maybe the power is out. So you can have a neighbor come and take care of it, or if you're home, you can know exactly what's going on. And you can come back and do something like a backup generator. So this little switch down in the lower portion of this slide, something I need to install. It's been on my list for like 3 months now. I bought it, and unfortunately, buying something is not good enough. You actually have to go through with it. So my next goal, my next project is to install this little switch. And what that allows you to do is we have propane furnace. And so we have the normal heat pump, air sourced heat pump that works most of the time. But then when it gets too cold for the heat pump, the propane furnace can kick in, or a lot of you probably have natural gas as your auxiliary heating source, or maybe natural gas is your primary heating source. But regardless, the natural gas probably is not going to cut off during a power outage or during the worst part of winter. It's going to be hard to freeze those gas lines. So what you can still have that gas flowing. And what you can do is it's the electricity portion of the natural gas furnace or the propane furnace is surprisingly low power. You just need to run the electronics and maybe a 300 to 500 watt fan to run your whole house. And that doesn't even need to run the whole time, right? Like you can run it for an hour and then it can be off for a couple hours and it can keep your house above freezing. And so the way to power those electronics Surprisingly, on most systems, it's actually not the 240 or high voltage system. It's just a normal 120 volt system. And if you install one of these switches, you can allow it to run off some sort of generator. And you can think, hey, maybe a gasoline generator. Or the nice thing now is they have these so-called solar generators that run off of a battery. And that battery can be recharged. You can charge it ahead of time. You can keep it at like 80% and just keep it in your closet. Or if there happens to be sun out while the power is out, you can actually recharge it via solar. And you can use this switch to safely switch between the main power, cut off the actual main source of electricity. And so there's no risk of back feeding the power to the line. So who's ever working on those power lines to restore power won't have any risk of getting a shock. You can switch that over and completely isolate your furnace so that you can power just your furnace from one of those battery powered generators. And so it's a really brilliant system that's capable now because we have these new battery powered generators. And those, I got mine, it's about 1,000 watt-hour system, and I paid about $400 for it on a really good sale. So you normally pay, you know, 500, 600 for the 1,000 watt-hours, or you can go up to 2,000 watt-hours or 4,000 watt-hours, just depending on how long you want to run your system. And so I think from my $400 battery system, I can get about 2 to 3 days if I go ahead and install it. And that's the key, is actually doing these things. And so at this point in the talk, we have this one, I've got one more slide with these checklists, and then I'll talk about kind of how you get the energy and the system to actually go ahead and do these. So the seasonal holiday checklist I've come up for you here is to think about, hey, if I have on my calendar, I have some holidays that come up that are national holidays. What kind of maintenance stuff should I be doing? So this is what I came up with is, if you think about your leak prone areas of your supply lines. So every 6 months, they say you're supposed to check those, maybe on your toilet or your faucets or your washing machine. And so I think about, hey, what would March and September look like? So maybe St. Patrick's Day, think about like doing that check then, and then another check Labor Day. You've probably got the day off for Labor Day anyway. So just mark that in your calendar, check those supply lines. Gutter spouts usually need to be checked like once a year, gutters and downspouts. So maybe do that around Halloween after the leaves have pretty much fallen. Maybe after post-Halloween cleanup, you're cleaning up all the candy wrappers in your neighborhood anyways. And so go and check your gutters and your downspouts for any potential ice buildup or any leaves that are going to get in the way and ruin your good roof. And then finally, think about humidity, and especially starting in Easter and maybe going even through as late as Thanksgiving or at least through Halloween in most parts. You want to be able to check your indoor humidity levels. And the kind of the magic formula for mold is kind of below 60 degrees and above 60% humidity. So if you're keeping the air conditioning high, but for some reason there's areas of your house that are not getting the dehumidification, like if you just have a fan or if you have a cool area, those cold walls, if it's poorly insulated and you have high humidity, that's where mold can really grow. So you want to make sure that your humidity stays very low in your house. You can get smart humidifiers. Wyze does sell a smart climate sensor that can tell you the humidity and the temperature. You can just use your thermostat to do that. A lot of the smart thermostats come with humidity sensors. But the key there is just for your comfort and for your house's health. You want to keep it below 50, but the surprising thing is you also want to keep it above 30, because in the winter, when you get really low, you have the risk of getting nasal infections and make your allergies worse. So we have in the summer, we have a dehumidifier. And in the winter right now, we have a whole house humidification system that attaches onto our furnace. And as part of this talk as well, I just remembered to go ahead and replace the water filter system for that furnace humidifier. So it's a little matrix that allows the water to drip down and be spread throughout the furnace area. And you're supposed to replace that. I think you're supposed to check it every year and replace it at least every 2 years, or maybe replace it every year. I realized it had been 3 years since I'd done mine, so mine was pretty calcified. It had a lot of hard water leftovers in it, so I should have done that sooner. So if you have that whole house humidifier, go ahead and check that and make sure that you're replacing that as often as it needs to. So at this point, I've given you a ton of checklist items. I've given you a ton of work to do. And I apologize, but you know, there's a good way to do it, and that's before you need to do it. And the way I think about all these habits and the way I think about all this preventative maintenance is to kind of give myself a treat to do it. So I try to pair a want, something I really want to do. Maybe it's watching a TV show or getting a ice cream treat out or something like that. And I pair that want with a need. And that's maybe in this case, it's this habit of all of this preventative maintenance that you want to do. Or the one I specifically have been doing for probably 20 years now is I try to only watch TV, and I don't always follow this, but in general, when I'm watching TV, I'm doing some sort of exercise. I have a nice stationary bike, or I'll take a walk outside and listen to a nice audio book or a novel. I've got some really long audio novels. Some are 50 hours plus. Andy and I were just talking about that, and so those are great to take a long walk. I can walk for an hour, and that audio novel drives me on. I want to hear what happens next, so I'm motivated to keep walking and keep doing that. Or on the TV on my exercise bike, or I actually just set up my little tablet in front of a walking pad I have for the winter. It's just in the closet. We didn't have any other space to put it. We didn't have a lot of dedicated space to put up a treadmill. So we bought one of those very small walking pads that we put in our walk-in closet. And now I have a place to put my tablet to watch a TV show while I'm doing that. So one example is, listen to a podcast only while you're folding laundry, or go get your fancy coffee, or in my case, it would be like a nice tea. And then make that for yourself while you're going through your budget or your checking account or your bank statements. Or in this case, go treat yourself to ice cream or a hot fudge sundae after you complete that seasonal checklist that we talked about. So that's kind of how you can trick yourself into doing these things. And if you want a name for this, the guy from the book called Atomic Habits, James Clear, he calls this temptation bundling. And it's a really good book. I first knew that was a huge book when I saw someone on the plane next to me reading a copy in Ethiopian. So I'm like, wow, this has been translated a lot. It's a really global bestseller. So go check it out. Go read the book. It's a really a top seller, especially around New Year's. People want to think about what their habits. So go buy yourself a copy now, and then maybe read it in January when you're ready to start a whole bunch of new habits and new thinking. All right, so let's keep going to air. We're about halfway done. So I've got this huge chart here, this nice little infographic that talks about the MERV rating system. And you're like, well, what does MERV stand for and why do I care? I'm trying to give you the secret decoder ring here to the minimum efficiency reporting values. And this is basically a standardized way of how they measure those furnace filters. You've probably seen those light blue kind of really webby furnace filters. I call it the cotton candy filter because it looks so light and filmy and just basically a spider web looking type thing. Those are basically on the MERV 1 side or MERV 2. I think they're just really terrible. My furnace HVAC guy tried to put one in when we first had our furnace installed. And I'm like, okay, you know what you're doing, but it turns out he really didn't. If you do your research, those have one good aspect to them. They're very cheap and they don't put a lot of pressure, a lot of load on your furnace. But that's about all they're good for. They don't really trap a lot of dirt. And so what ends up happening is your furnace ducts and your furnace, the exchanger, the heat exchanger, the rest of your furnace ends up getting dirty. And so you really need better protection. You really need something that's in the MERV 5 to probably 8 is the minimum place I would go for. I personally have a MERV 11 filter. We have, like I said, we have that spoiled rabbit and he has a lot of hair around, fortunately not much dander. So we have a much better filter, and the birds that we have do have quite a bit more dust than you would expect. So we have that good filter. And the reason we didn't go into the MERV 13 to 16 area is because it is a legitimate risk of thinking about, is there too much pressure? Is there too much load or blockage on your furnace from that very high filtration filter? So you've got to have this balance. And so my recommendation is keep it in that sweet spot of 8 to 11. But if you do have allergies, or you do have a smoker that lives with you, or you have really kind of concerns about volatile organic compounds or bacteria or viruses, if you need to go with that MERV 11, first of all, make sure that your filter your furnace can handle it. Make sure that there's enough return air flow for it to do well, and you can actually have a manometer pressure test to verify that. But then the other thing is it's going to get really expensive because you're going to have to change those higher rated filters more often because even the smallest particles will plug those up. So you want to be able to change those very, very frequently, maybe even as much as 30 days. So if you're spending 20 bucks per filter on those higher end filters and you're changing them every 30 days, that adds up to like $250 a year. So my sweet spot is I have my MERV 11 filter and I change that about every 3 months. And depending on the portion of the house, I have one air duct where it doesn't seem to get very dirty. There's only hardwood up where it is. So I can get away with changing that like every 6 months. So it's a really obvious area, but I hope I've given you a little bit more info on about how to kind of think about these filters. And the funny part is, even though it's obvious, it is still the number one source of HVAC or HVAC service calls. Like it's very intuitive, like, oh yeah, change the filter, but it's very easy to forget about it. Another one of those things that you're just like, oh, it's out of sight, out of mind. And you just need to change it as often as you do it. Now I have the 1-inch filters. And so some of you have the 2-inch or the 4-inch media boxes, and those are really convenient because you don't need to change those nearly as often. They have a much deeper pleating system that allows it to collect a lot more dirt before they really start to bog down. But if you have the 1-inch filters, you need to get into a really strong habit of checking those probably every month and then changing them at least every 3 months, but maybe even more often. All right. So now that we've talked about the furnace, there's another even higher end of air purification or filtration. So remember I talked about you don't want too high of a rating to avoid damaging your furnace. But if you really need super clean air, you can get a dedicated air purifier. And I gave a pretty good video about this in the last talk I did. If you didn't get a chance to attend that, you can watch online about people showing the air purifiers and how quickly they can deal with something like a candle smoke. So you can get special filters for formaldehyde, for example, that you can't get on a furnace, or for wildfire smoke. And then the nice thing about active air purifiers like this one that Wyze makes is that they actually have a dynamic fan speed because they have a laser particle detector. So the laser in there is actually scanning the air for the number of ppm, the number of parts per million, and the index of air quality, and it'll ramp up that fan much quicker as the air purifier senses more particulates in the air. And so that's something your furnace can't do, is it can't dynamically adjust to, like, hey, you're cooking, you're frying a steak, or for example, or you're roasting vegetables in the kitchen and you're generating a lot of smoke. And so we keep our air purifier directly in the kitchen to capture that. And it's a lot better than like a normal furnace hood because those usually don't have a very good filtration system. They can usually get air to the outside, but a lot of those are inside vented and don't do a good job. So this is a much better solution. Now, I actually have a really clever DIY hack. During the COVID epidemic, these two professors named Corsi and Rosenthal got together and said, hey, how can we make specialized, beautiful air filtration available to everybody? And they did it. Basically, you can go and get those MERV 13, so not the highest end, but pretty high end MERV 13 filters. And I've actually got a screen grab here from a cart I was showing to check out on Home Depot. Turns out that you can buy this 20-inch box fan. So it's a 20 by 20 box fan, and you get 4 20 by 20 filters. You build a base up around it with just simple duct tape. So for 75 bucks, $50 for the filters, because Home Depot gives you a half off discount if you buy 4, which is a good hack, and then 25 bucks for the fan. And the surprising thing is all of this stuff is made in the USA. The filters are made in the USA. The fan is actually made in the USA. So for 75 bucks, you now have this MERV 13 rated filter that will do viruses, it'll do volatile organic compounds, it'll do smoke, and the filter should last like up to a year. And you can run it at any speed. It's got, 3 speeds selectable. It's manual. But if you install it on a smart plug, you can have it turn on in response to, like, hey, you know that the afternoon is generally a worse air quality time. So you can have it turn on every afternoon. Or you can just have it running all the time on low speed. And so really inexpensive. It's The downside is it's pretty ugly. Maybe you can figure out a way to make it look nicer if you do some decoration. And it's not, you have to physically disassemble it when you want to replace those filters. So if you want to do some sort of woodworking project or maybe PVC pipe and make a permanent version, you can. But it's a really great solution to get. I mean, honestly, from the air purification insider knowledge that I have after having worked on the Wyze product, this $75 version is going to do better and last longer than some of the $1,000 versions that are out there. So it's really a win-win for being able to have your cake and eat it too. All right, under the air, I'm kind of cheating a little bit. I kind of grouped airwaves into the air category. So digital airwaves like your Wi-Fi and your cybersecurity. So this is a passion of mine. I worked on the Wyze router project that allowed us to launch a new, faster router that had good security. So if you have Wi-Fi 6E or Wi-Fi 7, those both come with something called WPA by default, WPA3, sorry, which is the most secure encryption for your router that's possible. So by upgrading, you're not only going to get faster speeds and higher coverage, like broader coverage for your whole house, you're also going to get better security. So just think about that. If you know you haven't upgraded your router in a while, that there is a way to provide more protection against someone hacking into your home network. The other way to do that is to provide a guest network or a separate network on your router for all of your IoT devices. That's standard practice. So you can segment those out and put them on a separate IoT network that they can only talk to each other, and they can't really talk to your laptops or your tablets or anything else. And that, if you buy a really advanced router, you can actually have separate policies and separate bandwidth. You want to say, hey, don't let the bandwidth from those IoT devices go crazy, or from my cameras. Or you can have your kids on their own separate network that allows them to throttle their screen time, or control the sites they go to, or even limit some of the social networking, or just the time they spend online. And there's routers like an Orbi router from Netgear has a service you pay for it. I think it's maybe 10 or 20 bucks a month, but it has extra security scanning, and you can actually tie it to your phone apps, and you can provide very granular methods and filters for your kids to keep your whole family safe, and especially from all the cyber attacks that are out there. So just as a checklist for there, I offered these for some of the other sections as well. New Year's resolution is the time that, end of December, during that lull between Christmas and New Year's. I may be the only one in the world that does this, or maybe it's super geeky, but I use that as a chance to go through and change all my passwords every year. And I got into the habit quite a few years ago of making them strong and unique. And the key word there is unique. Strong is relative, like you can have a long password that doesn't have as many symbols and stuff in that, and it's still pretty strong just because it's long. But the critical part is unique. So if you think about a site that gets hacked and all their passwords are compromised, if you were on that site and you had a password on there that you've used at 10 other sites, now that hacker has hacked only one site, but they get your password for 10 other sites. So that's the big reason. And I know it's a pain in the butt, but that's the big reason to have unique sites. And you can tell I've had this discussion with people that have been resistant, and it's a hard sell. But so get a password manager, have it generate the unique passwords. I've been really impressed on the iPhone, iPad. The new passwords app from Apple is very slick in offering to generate strong passwords for you, and the integration is really seamless. So use that. The second place for banking or anything that touches money, anything that touches identity, a risky site like your government login, your work login, your banking login, make sure to enable 2FA, and that's a two-factor authentication. So that's something you have, something you physically possess with something that like a PIN. Passkeys are a good example of that. They've come out as the #1 easiest way to do two-factor. But you can use your phone as a second factor. You can use a hardware key, like a YubiKey is what I'm a big fan with. There's one called Google Titan that works for that as well. And then finally, for your checklist, go through and find all your devices. Like if you're running Windows 10, it's an unsupported software right now. Like you need to upgrade that laptop or desktop to a newer version that will support Windows 11. So you want to keep those devices up to date. You want to keep the firmware on your router and your other devices, your tablets, up to date. A lot of times when you get compromised, when you get a hack, it's because there is a fix out there and you just didn't have it on your device. And that's the really sad realization, is that you could have had that security, you could have had that protection, and you just weren't aware of it. You just didn't take the time. So I kind of do all those things at least once a month. And then that password change, I make sure and change all those every year. All right, last element is Earth. And just as I was preparing for this talk, we saw the news from Japan about the earthquake and tsunami warning they had there. So I added a slide about earthquakes. I don't live in an earthquake zone, and I hope I never do. But you need to be prepared for earthquakes if you do. And so, the emergency kit for an earthquake that they advise you to build, that's for everybody. Honestly, you need a preparedness kit no matter where you live, because some part of the country is going to have a flood or a tornado or an earthquake or just a snowstorm. And so you need to have that kit. The exception is on the earthquake side, you probably want to have that kit stored somewhere outside. So if part of your house collapses, heaven forbid, your emergency rations and your water and everything are not in that part of the house that collapsed. So if you have an outside area or a shed or something like that, that's where you can put that. The next area is just securing furniture. I'm pretty guilty of this. Like whenever I buy that flat pack furniture, either a bookshelf or something like a dresser, you're supposed to put that wall anchor in to keep it from tipping over during some sort of earthquake. And I've done that maybe like twice when our kids were really young and I was afraid of them climbing on it. So I need to do a better job of that myself. And if you live somewhere with those potential earthquakes, you definitely want to do that. And then finally, we have talked about a lot about the water leakage, and you need to know, just in case of a water leak or a gas leak, you need to know where those automatic shutoff, not automatic, but where the shutoff valve is. And you can actually buy an automatic shutoff valve if you are not home and you know that there is a potential water leak. You can get a shutoff valve that will shut off the main valve for your water and prevent any further damage. And you can get the same thing for your gas pipeline as well. Or if you're home, you can do that manually right after the earthquake. You need to shut that off as quickly as possible to prevent an explosion, or like we talked about, that leaking and that disaster of the flood that's going to occur after the earthquake. All right, so for the rest of the Earth, we've got this idea of a defensible space. And I kind of thought about this idea of a castle, of saying, hey, a castle is surrounded by a moat, and then it's surrounded by an outer wall, and maybe a curtain wall, and then you've got your keep. And so you can kind of think about your house in that same kind of area, where think about your fence or maybe your landscaping as your kind of outer defense. And I would add lighting into there too. So you can see that picture I have there of the Wyze floodlight camera. So if you have a floodlight that can turn on automatically when someone approaches, burglars they love the dark and they love privacy. So don't let them have that. So keep your hedges trimmed, keep things well lit. Don't give people any place to hide, especially if you're on a busy street. Like use that to your advantage. Make sure that your house, all the entry places on your house are visible from that street, so that someone can't just break in easily. Finally, maybe think about getting a smart lock. If you haven't thought about smart locks lately, I think you'll be surprised at how many kinds and styles and finishes and different beautiful options there are. So this article from The Verge, it says, I tested 30 smart locks, and that's not an exaggeration. There are so many on the market. So if you looked at them in the past and you said, oh, no, that's not for me, there's probably a much better one right now. And so the front door is the obvious place to put that. And the nice thing about those is a lot of the ones, especially if they don't come with a key, they're much more resistant to getting picked or getting like a bump key than a traditional lock. So that's a really nice aspect of that, is that they can actually be more secure than a traditional lock. And the other nice thing is that they can automatically lock. So if you have a smart lock and you forgot to lock it, you left home and you weren't sure if you left the door, it can automatically lock it every time you close it. And then just to open it again, you either type in your PIN or you have a fingerprint, or the newest one we have actually uses your palm print as a unique the vein pattern in your palm is actually even more unique than your fingerprint. So you can use both of those to get access to your door when you need it, and then you can provide access via a PIN or via a one-time code for like a dog walker or a cleaning person or someone that's going to come and have authorized access to your house. Okay, and finally, going back to my castle analogy, if we think about that moat and that curtain wall, the garage and the front porch are kind of your drawbridge in that castle analogy. So don't forget those when you think about protecting things. Your porch, especially, we all know the term porch pirate now. I wish that term had never entered the vernacular. It's because people steal packages off your porch, and so the easiest way to deter that, easiest way to find who's doing that and give evidence to the police afterwards is to have a doorbell camera. And so you can get one like the Wyze doorbell that has two lenses on it. It actually has one for people facing up and then one for packages facing down. And then the other place is the garage door. And so you can think about, hey, did I forget and close my garage door? I've had that nightmare several times where I'm in bed and I just open my eyes and think, oh, did I shut it? And the nice thing is I have a camera in my garage that says, oh, I can just pull that up on my phone and I don't have to get out of my warm bed. And then in one of the garage doors I have multiple garage doors, but in one of those, I actually have the Wyze garage door controller that if I forgot to shut it for any reason, I can actually shut it from my phone. And there's multiple options for that. A lot of the garage door openers nowadays have smart functionality in them. So that's super convenient. And a lot of them have cameras. So that's my advice is to get a camera for the garage and a camera for the front porch and just be able to protect that kind of moat or the drawbridge area of your castle. And I think I'm right on time. I wanted to leave a little bit of time for questions. So I'd love to take your questions now.
Yeah, Steve, thank you so much for that. There were some good questions that came in, and folks still have an opportunity to pass along any questions that you may have. First one comes is in regards to some of the water detection systems. So what would they go off if it was maybe very humid while showering for bathrooms that don't have vents or windows for airflow? Any insights or comments that you can make in regards to some of the water detection or mitigation systems?
That's a great distinction. I should have been more clear on that. So there are two types. There's a leak sensor, and so a traditional leak sensor won't go off just for humidity. It will go off for pooled water. It's looking for it's got two or four electrodes that are trying to make contact with dirty water, and that water is actually functioning as a conductive medium. And so humidity won't do that. But you can get humidity sensors that will go off and have an alarm. And so if you do have a shower that gets really, really foggy or steamy all the time, maybe don't put the humidity sensor in that room. But one good place to put the humidity sensor, we've actually our neighbor in Colorado when I used to live there. Colorado, as you know, is not a humid place, and you wouldn't normally think about a humidity sensor there. But these guys had a bathroom that they had teenage sons that would take long showers, and the vent fan in that bathroom, it turns out the duct work to that vent fan was broken and it was getting super humid in the attic to the point where it was growing mold in the attic. Very counterintuitive for Colorado. And so a good place for the humidity sensor up there would have been in the attic to say, hey, my attic is getting really humid. That's not supposed to happen. What's going on? And so maybe that humidity sensor can be placed in areas where you think there shouldn't be humidity. And if there is, then you have a good sense of, okay, I need to take action. So they had to go, and when they sold the house, the inspector found that. So they not only had to reattach the ductwork, they had to spray for mold and get a full remediation in the attic. So the idea with humidity and leaks is to a stitch in nine saves time. Like a stitch in time, sorry, saves nine. So you want to be able to do proactive work and prevent that ahead of time.
Thank you for your response on that. Next question comes from Joan. Do you recommend quote unquote winter watchmen to alert neighbors via pre-panned light signal in your windows? I don't know if you're familiar with the winter watchman, Steve, or not. If you're away and your home temp dips below 55 per se. So any comments on a service or a product that allows you to alert neighbors if your home dips between that? I don't know, Joan, if you're able to maybe comment a little bit more on the winter watchman, but any replies to that, Steve?
I've not heard of that, but it sounds great. Like in our neighborhood, a lot of the houses have Christmas decorations in the windows. That when this neighborhood was built, each house was built with outlets in front of the front-facing windows that have a special circuit. It's a split circuit so that one light switch controls that split circuit on both levels. So you can actually, the house was built almost 30 years ago, so there's no smart lights back then. And so the Christmas lights could be controlled on both levels from that one switch. And so a lot of the houses in the neighborhood have those Christmas lights, but I could definitely see using those same outlets then for something smart to say, hey, if it does get cold, you have some sort of bulb that lights up that is a different non-Christmassy color, maybe a blue or a yellow or something like that, that would show people, hey, neighbor across the street from me, if you see a yellow light when they're supposed to be green and red, maybe come and look at my house because something's happened.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for that. Next question comes from Barb in regards to the Corsi Rosenthal box. Does flooring matter for air quality? So I think about, like my home, how, at least from a humidity perspective, right? The basement versus other levels, what have you, but does flooring matter for the air quality?
Absolutely. That's a great observation. I should have mentioned that. So if you think about all the stuff that ends up on your air filter or in your vacuum cleaner bag, they've done analysis of that, and a lot of it is like pet dander, like we said, dead skin cells. But most of the time, the majority of it, if you live in a house with carpet, it's gonna be those carpet fibers. And if you're paying any attention to the world of microplastics at all, those carpet fibers, that's a good source of microplastics. A lot of our carpet is basically just spun plastic. We've tried to get rid of carpet as much as we could in our house. We still have carpet in all of our bedrooms. But the good news is in our house, the carpet is quite old. So I think it's done most of the shedding that's going to do. It's slowed down. But especially new carpet, it's going to shed a ton at first, and you're going to need that air filtration to capture all those little particles that are left over from the production process, and also just it's brand new and it's going to shed.
Great insight there. Next question. Is there a way to link this talk to family members? That's such useful information. Thank you, Steve. And I'll go ahead and take that one. Yes, this event is being recorded, and the recording link will be shared to the email address in which you used to register for the event today. So keep an eye out for that. Next question from Abby. Any thoughts as to why a carbon monoxide detector would go off when the shower is on?
Oh, that is a great question. I don't know exactly enough how those work. I know like a smoke detector works either with some sort of particle detection, and a lot of times they use like an americium element that's decaying, and it detects that decaying particle, and smoke can interfere with that. But I've actually never investigated how a carbon monoxide detector works, so that's a great question. I don't know.
Uh, Lots of some more comment. I'm reading some more comments in here in regards to the Watchmen, the Winter Watchmen. It sounds like some other folks are familiar with that. That concludes all of the questions that we had come in. Still a few minutes here in case there's any last minute pressing questions on your end. Steve, such a wonderful wealth of information. Thank you so much for taking the time to put together this presentation
You're welcome. Thank you.
and share this. I know there's a lot of praise from folks, a lot of good discourse and dialogue today. So thank you so much for that. And as we kind of conclude our session here today, here at DreamBank, we're a community that is built up of fellow fearless dreamers, and we always like to ask our presenters, what is one piece of advice you have for someone who is actively pursuing a dream right now?
Start early. I think the biggest magical part of life, not only in money, but just in skills or friendships or relationships, is this kind of compounding effect. So the more you have at the beginning, the earlier you start, the more that can compound. I'm still reaping the benefits of friendships and relationships, and just the wisdom of people I've known now for 20, 25 years. And it's really been a blessing. So just any endeavor, any goal you want to have, any savings goal or career goal or skills, start sooner than you think you need to. Just start and get going, and let it just snowball, let it just compound and build. And it's just a magical, amazing way effect that has of blowing your mind of how much gain you've gotten because of the gains upon gains upon gains due to that compounding effect.
I love it. I love it. Steve, I think that's a wonderful place to wrap up. Thank you again so much for putting together this presentation. Thank you all for taking time to join us here today. Keep an eye out for the recording link as well as the survey link in your inbox today. With that being said, we will go ahead and cap it there, and we will see you all next time. Take care.